We are in day 76 in Numbers 76. And this chapter goes through all the able-bodied men that were able to fight in the wars, because as we know, the Israelites had to go all over for 40 years, and they had to defeat a lot of the foes of Israel, all the pagan people that were, practiced evil practices and worshipped pagan gods. God commanded them to go in and basically take them out, or the evil will literally take over the world. God knows what he's doing. So he goes through and lists all the able-bodied men of 20 years old and older of all the tribes, except for the Levite tribe, as we talked about, because they were the ones that carried out, they were basically the ministers and the pastors of their day. They did all the work in the tabernacles. They handled all the sacrifices. They would take care of all the utensils. They would carry the tents and the whole tabernacle. They would take them wherever they went. They did all the duties all the ministerial duties, we will say. So they were never supposed to fight in wars. But all the other 11 tribes were all listed, and in all, there were 601,730 able-bodied warriors. But after listing them, God carefully reminded them of the 250 warriors that were unfaithful, that did not follow God's laws. And what God did, remember I said it was like those movies that you see, where the earth literally separated, fire consumed them, they fell down and were buried alive, it says, and then the earth literally covered them. I mean, haven't we all seen scenes in movies like that? And you just think it's Hollywood, but it actually happened. So God was very careful to remind the Israelites, when he listed all the tribes and all their warriors, what happens when the warriors are unfaithful and they don't do what God commands them to do. We are in Luke 2, and I love this chapter because to me, it's about how God honors his faithful people. And we read yesterday how God honored Simeon and promised him, because he was such a righteous, godly man, that he would not die until he saw the Messiah. And then he went into the temple right when Mary and Joseph were bringing Jesus into the temple. And we had read how he had praised God and prophesied over what would happen in the future, how many would reject him, yet many he would bring joy, and what would happen in Jesus's life. I love that. Then there was this widow woman, and her name was Anna, and she was only married 7 years, and her husband died. And it says that she was older in her years, and she was 84 at the time. So she had been a widow a long, long time, but yet she devoted her entire life to serving the Lord. It says she was literally in the temple all day and all night before God, fasting and praying. There are going to be a lot of surprises in heaven. I had a godly grandmother and great aunt that would stay up all night praying, and they would fast for weeks at a time. And they had a little Pentecostal church, and my grandmother played the piano, and my great aunt would teach, and she would sing and play the tambourine. And those women truly devoted their entire lives to serving Jesus. So it reminds me of this Anna. So it says that she walked in exactly when Simeon was there and when Mary and Joseph had arrived with Jesus. And here's what it says. When she came along, just as Simeon was talking with Mary and Joseph, and she began praising God. She knew immediately that he was the Messiah. She talked about the child to everyone who had been waiting expectantly for God to rescue Jerusalem. Then it says, after that, they took Jesus home when he was after his 8th day. And it says that he grew up healthy and strong, and he was filled with wisdom, and God's favor was on him. So every year they would come into Jerusalem for the annual Passover services. And when he was 12, they all came in and they left, and they didn't realize, because there was a big group with them, that Jesus was not with them. So they got back and had to turn around and go back and get him. And I've seen those roads and I've seen the terrain. And when they say they had to go back, this wasn't getting in your car and driving a few minutes. And they did not have Nike hiking shoes and water bottles. And yet they had to go back and find Jesus. And Mary was like, where have you been? It says 3 days later, they finally discovered him looking through Jerusalem. They couldn't even find him in the city. No cell phones then. And he was sitting amongst the religious teachers, listening to them and asking questions. And all who heard him were amazed at his understanding and his answers. But his parents said, where have you been? We've looked for you everywhere. And he says, why did you need to search? He asked. Didn't you know that I must be in my Father's house? And his mother, once again, stored all these things in her heart. So she listened to the wisdom of her son, and she stored everything up in her heart. And it says Jesus grew in wisdom and in stature and in favor with God and all the people. They were all amazed and awed at his teachings. David, because he had such a close relationship with the Lord, he knew that if we did anything out of human effort, it will fail miserably. He knew that all his victories, and the only way that he had victory, is when he served the living God who was going to fight his battles for him. And I love what he says in this psalm. He says, oh, please help us against our enemies, for all human help is useless. With God's help, we will do mighty things, for he will trample down our foes. So he knew, without God, these battles are absolutely futile, and he was not going to win. Then in Proverbs 11, it says, there's danger in putting up security for a stranger's debt. It's safer not to guarantee another person's debt. Well, I can attest to that, because once you lend to a friend and you don't get paid back, it causes strife. It just does. So God warns us. He knows human beings way better than we know ourselves, and he is a God who does not change. And by learning this, we are learning his ways and learning to trust him and to live for him. Isn't that the greatest thing in the world? Nothing else really matters in this earth.